What's up, everyone? Happy Feast of Our Lady of Lourdes. It is a special day in the church. Remember this special feast day. On the docket today, we are going to be talking about breaking news. Just happened. Catholic removed from the Religious Liberty Commission, which is under the Justice Department. And we're going to talk more about Epstein files because it's not going away and it should not be going away. I'm your co-host, John Yep, and fellow co-host, Michael Hichborn. Stay tuned. See you in a bit. Happy Feast Day of Our Lady of Lourdes. It is a special day. I myself have actually been there. This is, of course, the day every Catholic should know about this, February 11th, 1858, where Our Lady appeared to Bernadette Soubirous in the way south of France, around the border of Spain, very kind of poor area. And she had those series of apparitions. And then, of course, the final apparition resulted when Bernadette was actually able to, she dug up the spring as Our Lady told her to. And, the waters have come up there from those springs since that moment, 1858. And I think that the last count is that there's officially 70 declared miracles from the Vatican from that apparition site. I mean, there's been thousands more reported, okay, but at least 70. So just a very powerful day. Michael, have you ever been at apparition site?
No, I've not. I've always wanted to go, but I've never actually been.
It is amazing. I had the chance to go there right after I left the seminary in 2015.
Incidentally, one of our parishioners here in Virginia is an approved miraculous healing.
No way.
Mm-hmm.
What were the details?
She was suffering a debilitating illness, and I don't know the details of what the nature of the illness was, but she was in a wheelchair and she was dying. And as kind of a last ditch thing, she couldn't walk. She could barely eat. And so they took her to Lourdes, and the healing was instantaneous. She was fully restored to complete health, could walk immediately, but chose not to simply because it's almost like survivor's guilt. She saw all the people that went there for a healing that didn't receive one, and didn't want to basically didn't want to make them feel bad about not being healed, whereas she was. But yeah, everything, it went through the entire process, and she is one of the approved healings at Lourdes.
That's amazing. How long ago was that?
10 years ago.
Because I think I was reading on the Vatican News of 2018, I think it was the last declared miracle. So that might be the actual miracle. It's like the number 70, almost exactly right. So that'd be interesting to see. But I myself received a certain healing there, not crazy out of the blue. I'll maybe share about it on a different day, but it's a moment. It's a special place. You go in those waters, and they separate the men from the women, and you go in and you completely strip down and you just jump in, or you have bathing suits on, and you jump in the water. I just remember, obviously it's freezing cold, right? And it's kind of like, before you even do that, like you're in the waiting room and just sitting down, and it's just pure silence. You got guys from all over the world, right? And it's like they each are in their like prayer zone, and just getting ready for that moment, not knowing what kind of healing Our Lady's going to give you, right? And then you just go in the waters to help you out, give you a towel, and then you're out. It's pretty quick, and just a real special moment. It's I've been to many different Marian apparitions. Each one's unique in its own way, and one of the things I enjoyed about when I toured France and I saw Our Lady of Lourdes was I saw the convent where Bernadette ended up going in later in life, which is kind of typical, like the seers, right? They would have their apparition, they become extremely famous, and then they want to get away from the other world, so they kind of retreat to a convent like Sister Lucia did, right, later on in her life. And that particular convent where Bernadette used to go to, I want to say it's more in central France. You might even know this, Michael, where she ended up, where she lived her last days, or our producer can figure that out in 5 seconds. But I remember going to the convent and just praying in front of the very statue of Mary in the garden, that Bernadette used to pray in front of, right? I want to say that she had another apparition there later on in life, or like she felt Mary speak to her there from that statue. Don't quote me on that, but at least just to like, I mean, it's pretty surreal. Like to actually go in front of a statue where a seer, actually prayed in front of. Like it's pretty cool. So, have you had your what Marian apparition have you been to? Please tell me one.
I know. Okay, yes, I went to Our Lady of Our Lady of Revelation. I think, yeah, that's the name of it. So in Rome, at Tre Fontane in 1947, Our Lady appeared to Bruno Cornicola, who and the interesting thing is that the soil at Tre Fontane at that particular apparition site is said to have miraculously healing qualities to it. So there are a lot of healings that are associated with the apparition at Our Lady of Revelation there at Tre Fontane.
Okay, I lived in Rome for 5 years. I did not hear about this apparition site. Tre Fontane, which means three fountains in Italian.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the same place as, because there is a
church where Paul was decapitated? Yeah.
And his head bounced 3 times, which is why there are 3 fountains there, right?
Yep.
Okay, I never heard that Mary appeared there. Is that a declared apparition of the church? Are you spouting
Absolutely,
heresy?
yes. In fact,
really?
Pius XII commissioned the statue that was then processed through Rome all the way to, it was like 3 miles, processed all the way to that particular site. And there's a shrine there now too, that Pius XII personally approved and commissioned. So yeah, no, it's definitely approved. In fact, on the I think it was the 50th anniversary of the apparition to Bruno Cornicola, there was the miracle of the sun that was recorded by a local news station right there in Tre Fontane as the procession was taking place. So the miracles there continue. The story, if you ever read it, is absolutely amazing. And I'll tell you, the visions and the prophecies attributed to Bruno Cornicola through Our Lady of Revelation are pretty prescient for our times.
You should do a special report on that next show. Give us something on that, actually what that is. At that place, it's funny, again, I was there as a seminarian. I think part of the issue too, my Italian was not great when I went there early on in my seminary formation. So maybe they gave us a tour and they showed this the months I lived there, right? And I missed that one. But I do remember this. I do remember going in. Do you remember the church? Not the church where his head bounced 3 times, right? But there's a church which is built over the cell, right? Remember that? Mm-hmm. So the cell in the crypt of the church, they have the cell. Get this, people, where St. Paul spent the last night on this earth in that cell before he was let out, maybe like 50 yards away, and was decapitated, right? So I remember just climbing in that cell and just sitting in that dirt, and just like soaking it in, like St. Paul, the great warrior for the faith, died right, spent his last night here. So pretty surreal, some of the stuff we have here in Christendom. Last point I'll add on this too. There's this Real America's Voice been having this series of in-depth faith segments. I already, this, Mike, because I consulted you on Noah's Ark for yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
But they've had this like in-depth faith series. I tell this for the audience, like every day this week is different miracle of Christendom, right? So Noah's Ark was yesterday, Shroud Train was Monday, tomorrow's Our Lady of Fatima, right? And it's kind of neat because it's like I'm talking to a largely non-Catholic audience, so they're intrigued, right? Today was the Ark of the Covenant, right? Everyone everybody wanted the Indiana Jones story. Okay, there you go. Exactly. That's from. So there you go. I showed pictures of Michael. I got to be famous because I was able to tell him that my friend was actually on Mount Ararat, right? That was pretty cool. They love that. Audience loved that. And I mean, you can say it's better than me, but what you're looking at right now is actually, hold that picture right there, because that is significant, because that is the first truly Catholic mass offered at the top of that mountain where Noah's Ark is believed to rest since Noah left the Ark. You want to any more details there on that, Michael?
Yeah, so when we got to the top of the mountain, Father brought his mass kit, but we didn't have an actual altar to say mass on. Carrying a table all the way up the mountain is
Yeah.
rather difficult. So what we did is we actually constructed an altar out of the snow that was on top of the mountain, and
Which is
we
crazy, by the way, because it looks like it's like 10 below zero up there. It looks like Mount
it
Everest.
was quite cold. It was very, very cold. In fact, the wind was whipping. You can see it kind of billowing in on this photo. The wind was between 40 and 60 miles an hour up there on top of the mountain. And I mean, that tent was leaning at a 45-degree angle at certain points. But it was the Feast of Our Lady of Snows,
That's crazy.
whereupon
Okay, that's crazy. I keep going.
whereupon we had mass said on an altar made out of snow. And we had a little bit of a miracle too while we were up there, because just before mass, as Father was vesting, now you've got to understand, we're at the elevation of about 17,000 feet, over 17,000 feet. I think it's about 12,000 feet where plants stop growing and you don't see insects and you don't see any wildlife, because the air is too thin for the wildlife to actually survive. Every once in a while, you might see a bird soaring up and then going back down, but it's only for brief periods of time. You never see them land up there. So here at 17,000 feet, and we've got oxygen masks for when we move around because the air was so thin. Father was vesting, and all of a sudden, a bee flew into the tent. Now you've got to understand, there's no life up here. There is nothing by which a bee could be carried up to where we were. And for a bee to fly into the tent is significant in and of itself, but the bee is representative of Our Lady. Specifically, she's always been viewed as a symbol of Our Lady. So here we were on top of Mount Ararat, and on the Feast of Our Lady of Snows, having mass said on an altar made out of snow, and a bee representing Our Lady flies into the tent. So I think it was very much a sign of the significance of what was happening right there on top of Mount Ararat.
If you don't know Michael Hichborn yet, you got to know him better. I mean, this guy, he just shows up in a suit every week, but little do we know, he takes these crazy adventures to on the border of Iran, Turkey, Armenia to look for, well, just to pray on the top of Mount Ararat, right? So that's pretty amazing. Our Lady of Snows, by the way, if people don't know that, why, what the significance of that feast day, again, it goes back to Rome. I think the year like 300, 400, 500, around there, right?
Right.
Where it was the Pope time. I want to say Pope Leo.
I think it was, well, I don't know which Pope, but it was
Come on, producer, give me the name, make us look good here. Whatever the Pope's name was, he prayed for where he should have the basilica, right?
Right.
And it's snowed on what would become Saint Mary Major, right? And they built the basilica right on top of that, right on top of that hill. It snowed that night in August in Rome, right?
Yeah.
Whether that was snow or flowers or whatever, but it was like Mary's way of saying, this is where I want my church to be built, right? So another very interesting Mary connection there. So anyway, yeah, Noah's Ark. Never thought, this organization, it's Catholic for Catholics. Michael was talking to me like, John, isn't politics your thing? Like, I mean, it is, but the reality is, like, we're in politics because it's the affairs of the people, and Christ has to sanctify every aspect of life, of course, but that you use politics, and I'm talking about these things, they have significance for today. So Noah's Ark was yesterday. Ark of the Covenant was at, 7 a.m. this morning. And Ark of the Covenant was an interesting one. This is the last tangible going before we dive into our show, right? About a Catholic getting booted off the Religious Liberty Commission, right? This is the warm up. But Ark of the Covenant, okay? Like, there you go. So, I'm reading the notes that they sent me. And Michael, did you know this? That the CIA, there was a document that was just released that Anna Paulina Luna, congressman, it says, or it wasn't released, she had access to it, in which she saw the CIA files, which said that they had found the Ark of the Covenant in 1988. Now, and she went on Joe Rogan and talked about it. Do I believe that? I don't believe that. And here you read the story, it's like
Mhm.
it's one of these weird stories typical of the CIA. Is like they were using like mind projection to like get their people to like think about it, which I think is like totally crazy and not Catholic, right? Obviously,
Yeah,
but
Project Stargate.
yeah, it's just like
Mhm.
yeah, it probably was that. But that so anyways, I briefly mentioned that and then talk about obviously what the ark was, which it had Ten Commandments, manna, and then the rod of Aaron. But
Mhm.
then was able to use it to audience knows this Ark of the Covenant. Of course, we believe as Catholics that Mary, the Blessed Mother, is the Ark of the Covenant, right?
Yep.
She's
Yep.
actual today. So anyway, fun stuff. So yeah, if you want to watch the rest of the Faith series, tomorrow's Our Lady of Fatima, and then Friday's Malachi, the prophecy of Malachi. So anyway, it's we're doing what we're doing. You know, we're Catholics in the public square. And on that note, breaking news, just about probably about 30 minutes before the show started, there was a blow up yesterday. Let me give you the context. Religious Liberty Commission, okay, which is under the auspice of the U.S. Justice Department. Okay, so Trump, when he took office, God bless him, instituted this Religious Liberty Commission, and with the intention basically to look at some of the attacks on religion and here in the United States, especially after the last regime under Biden. Right, there was some severe stuff going on. Pro-lifers thrown in prison. You know, you had adoption agencies which were targeted for not accepting, unless they gave children out to people of same-sex relationship, blah blah blah, right? So Trump established this commission. Now, Catholics for Catholics, a little bit back up. We can throw that on the screen too if we can. Our Tithe of the America Praise campaign. We were connected to this Religious Liberty Commission in that in September the members of the White House Faith Office asked for Catholics to actually be founding members or coalition partners for what Trump was about to announce, which was called the America Praise Campaign. We throw it on the screen. And it was the idea to basically, obviously, bring prayer back to America. So September 8th, I was there in front of this Religious Liberty Commission, and President Trump spoke, and it was really cool to see like this idea. I mean, Trump's not perfect, obviously, we know that. There you go, right there, America Praise Campaign. And we're listed on the White House with like 14 other organizations, which is pretty amazing. I actually sent my last text to Charlie Kirk from that room with Trump that day, which is 2 days before he died, right? But so that's kind of like the background of what this Religious Liberty Commission is about, right? So and why is it under the Justice Department? Because the idea is that they're able to give this information if there have been unjust attacks on people of faith in America to Pam Bondi. There you go, Catholic for Catholics right there. So that we can they can act right and restore justice to people who've been hurt, right? So great concept, love it. Mike and I could talk all day about religious liberty, which is partly why there was a blow up yesterday. Honestly, a misunderstanding of what religious liberty is all about. There are 2 Catholic bishops on there. Who are the bishops? You know offhand, by chance?
I
I think
don't.
it's Dolan. It's Cardinal Dolan, and then it's Bishop Barron. And there's like 2 advisors who are also, but not on the commission, but the 2 advisors. One's like Paprocki and I forget the other one, right? So anyway, they had a hearing yesterday. Okay, there was like 10 different hearings they had planned for the administration. So whatever number that was yesterday, it was all about anti-Semitism. Okay, they brought on all these experts, had the whole panel there. The panel, by the way, so they have 2 bishops on top, but the one who leads it is Mary Margaret Bush, who's a very good Catholic. She's a great girl. I know her, met her husband recently, and they do a lot of good stuff, right? So it was about anti-Semitism, right? And the chair of the commission, so I guess Mary Margaret's like below the chair, is Lieutenant Dan Patrick, right? And Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick of Texas, chair of President Trump's Religious Liberty Commission, okay? So here's what happened, okay? Let's watch the key moment when a certain woman named Carrie Prejean Boller, okay, and I'm just starting to get to know her, right? It's funny, my wife is like, you don't know who that is? I'm like, no, I don't. I was 15 years in seminary, so I'm catching up on all the culture stuff, right? So, she was a Miss California, okay, back in like 2009. And, she's had some past controversies, but, she took a couple strong stands for marriage, standing for what marriage really is in California. and then kind of got thrown in more into this political sphere recently, and she became Catholic in April of 2025. Okay, so, and then I don't know how she ended up on this commission, but she was a member of this Religious Liberty Commission. Okay, so this is her yesterday in Washington, D.C. at this hearing on anti-Semitism. Okay, let's play the clip, and we're going to comment on this play-by-play.
Many of the students who I've spoken to personally who created those encampments say that they were protesting the killing of tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians in Gaza and their university's financial ties to that war. So I need to ask you, in a country built on religious liberty in the First Amendment, do you believe someone can stand firmly against anti-Semitism, including what you experienced, and at the same time condemn the mass killing of Palestinians in Gaza, or reject political Zionism, or not support the political state of Israel? Or do you believe that speaking out about what many Americans view as genocide in Gaza should be treated as anti-Semitic? Because in my view, the United States cannot and must not make loyalty to a particular theology about Israel a litmus test for protected speech or moral legitimacy.
Charlie Kirk said that Jew hate is brain rot. Some people don't have brains.
Let me pause there really fast. Okay, so Harry's point is that, and I'll let Michael comment, is basically like, look, she's trying to make a separation here, okay, between hating on people over religion, or I don't want to use the word hate, disagreeing with a certain religion and disagreeing with a political philosophy, okay? She's trying to make that line because they get so jumbled together, I think on purpose, right? And her point is, and this is, I don't know if you're going to show this or not, but she actually wanted to bring a certain rabbi from New York who was her friend, who was basically like speaking up for a lot of the Jews in America who feel that they're almost sometimes treated second rate. Why second rate? Because they're seen like if they don't give their full allegiance back over to the nation state, the 1948 state of Israel, and their love is more to the United States of America as their patria, they're less of a Jew, okay? So Carrie was trying to bring a different perspective, which I think was brilliant because it's important, right? And then she starts getting attacked, right? What are your just initial thoughts on this whole thing, Michael?
You're definitely hitting on my favorite topic. And I say that with all sarcasm. This is not my favorite topic. I actually can't stand this topic.
Why that? That alone, I think is important to understand because I think
because I'm sick of it. Because the bottom line is, look, when I was getting involved in politics in the 1990s, and I would hear all kinds of stuff coming from the Anti-Defamation League and everything from the 90s there was so much stuff coming about Judaism and Jews and Israel and da. And after a while, I just said, you know what? I don't care. I don't care. Why should I care? What is this to me? What does this matter to me at all? So, I'm so sick and tired of the topic, but let me tell you something. When I hear people talking about Israel and I hear people talking about the Jews, my first and primary question is, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Are you talking about the geographical location of what is currently called Israel? When you talk about this idea that the Jews have a perpetual covenant with God to secure, maintain, and control what is called the geographical location of Israel, are you saying that that covenant was in perpetuity? And if so, will you then say that from 70 AD to 1948 AD that God had revoked that perpetual covenant, that he had said, nope, that's done for a time and now they're back? And what would that be based on? If we're talking about the Jews, are we talking about an ethnic group or are we talking about a religion? And if we're talking about a religion, which of the 10 sects of Judaism are we discussing? In fact, did you know that out of the 10 sects that I know of, the 10 sects of Judaism, there's only one that's waiting for a Messiah? Only one. The rest of them are either not waiting for a Messiah or they say that the Messiah is some sort of love between them all. So what are we even talking about?
Which sect is that, by the way? You know, offhand?
I don't know off. I think it's the Orthodox Judaism. I
Okay.
mean,
Right.
after a while, it all runs together. But here's the thing. If you're going to talk about the Jews, define your terms.
Mhm.
Define your terms. Judaism, properly understood, and this is what gets me about Nostra Aetate. Okay, everybody says Nostra Aetate says that the Jews and the Christians worship the same God.
That's the document for the Second Vatican Council on Ecumenism. Go.
Right. Now, if you want to say that the God of Abraham and the God of Christianity is the same God, yes, 100%. I fully agree. And guess what? The God of Abraham was a triune God. Who were the three strangers that met with Abraham? It was the Trinity. And he recognized them as a Trinity. He worshiped all three. Worshipped all three. If you want to understand, what's that?
Solid point there.
Okay. So the God of Abraham is the Christian God. We reject Marcionism. Marcionism is a heresy that cropped up sometime in the, I think it was 200 something. Marcion was a heretic. Marcion said that the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament are separate and different gods. So we don't believe that. But if you're going to say that Jews and Christians worship the same God, you have to define who you mean by the Jews. If you want to say that we're talking about pre-New Covenant Jews, then yes, we worship the same God. If you're talking about Jews post-Christ, you're now talking about a completely different theology from what existed prior to it, because they changed their own texts, so their texts are not the same. They are not anticipating the Messiah that was prophesied in the Old Testament. The rejection of Christ as God, by definition, is a heresy. Because to say that Jesus was not divine is a defined heresy. You have to treat modern Judaism as a heresy. And once you do that, then you can start answering some of these other questions about what we mean by Israel and what we mean by the Jews having a right to Israel and to control Israel, et cetera, et cetera. If you're talking about the Jews who followed the proper prophecies that were established in the Old Testament and fulfilled in Christ and then became followers of Christ, yes, I can completely agree. They are the ones who have a right to Israel. We can agree with that.
It's a solid point. So 9 out of the 10 sects of Judaism, according to Michael, is they're running away from the Messiah. Okay, which is
Right.
like, what is that? What really is that? The other thing too is that you'll hear very often among a lot of the more powerful leaders of, they call themselves the Jewish Zionist movement, right?
Mhm.
Is the term, I love this, I am an atheistic Jew.
Yeah.
It's like, case in point, who is the biggest funder of the IEF? It's the same person. Remember this whole battle about TikTok, the Chinese have, the Chinese, whatever. Trump comes in and his people around him said, we got to get it from the CCP, got to take it back. And so we bought it. Well, who bought it from the CCP?
Right.
Same person, Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison is biggest funder of IDF and bought TikTok, owns TikTok right now. So if you've been, censored a little bit, some of your content, maybe it could be that, don't know. But Larry is, read his bio, right? Wikipedia, I'm an atheistic Jew. What does that actually mean? Like, what does that mean? It's like,
Right.
I'm an atheistic Catholic. Like, what? Right? So, okay, why is that? Okay, we know that there's a confusion on terms. Okay, why do you think? Maybe you don't know, Michael. Like, why is there this confusion? Is it intentional? Like, do they not want to be defined so clear? Do they want to muddle the waters? Because honestly, it serves a great purpose. In some ways, it's a brilliant strategy, intentional or not, because you're just trying to say, if you're members of our faith, therefore you got to support the nation state of Israel. Like they try to make this inseparable link, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
it's interesting because I can't remember what court case it was. There was an actual court case that was heard with regard to this definition of Judaism, because there was an individual from the United States who was an ethnic Jew who converted to Catholicism, who wanted to become a citizen of Israel. And when it came out that he was ethnically Jewish but converted to Catholicism, they denied him his citizenship. Okay. So when you start talking about this idea that the Jews should be in control of Israel, they have a right to Israel, etc., you don't even have a foundation for what you're talking about. There is no foundation here. And then you have to go back and say, well, what by what establishment do we determine that they have a right to rule Israel? And then you have to turn to the Old Testament covenant that says that this land was given to the Jews in perpetuity. But since you haven't even defined who you're talking about as the Jews, you can't even say who it is that has to be in control of Israel. So the whole argument just unravels under its own weight. There is no merit to the discussion. So then, of course, you get those who currently say, well, the state of Israel has a right to exist. Well, who's saying they don't? Who's saying it doesn't? And if you want to talk about nation states as they currently exist and having allies and alliances.
By the way, of course they say the strongest proponents of Zionism are, and in fact, the president of Israel is making his 8th visit to the United States today to make the case that all of the Muslim nations around us are saying that we don't have a right to exist. Therefore, President Trump, we need arms, weapons, whatever, to go to war with Iran. That's what, so plenty of them, they say it all.
So my response to that is, why does that have anything to do with my country? What do we care about the international relations between two countries that are ruled by non-Christian entities? Why should I even care? What is that to me?
100%. Absolutely agreed. Michael, you are on the same page with this. I mean, the one thing is, like, at the end of the day, I want our Christian sites to be prepared or protected, right?
Sure.
So however that's achieved. And that, look, the reality is, based on what we're hearing from reports from Cardinal Pizzaballa and others, that it's not the traditional assumption that Christians are safer under an Israeli-led thing where they have more access to sites as opposed to in Muslim countries. Debates. Obviously, ISIS is crazy. Now, obviously, the other question is who actually funded ISIS, who funded Hamas is also a very interesting point. Matt Gaetz, who was up for Attorney General, has laid on the line, declaring that it was Bibi Netanyahu himself who funded Hamas. Or you can check out what Matt's had to say about that. So, I think that us practically is like, who is the best person? It could be a Christian state. I think it was Steve Bannon over the other day proposed that. Like, why don't we have a Christian state over there, like our own region that has access to sites divided 3 ways, right? So that's my best interest. I do not want to see the holy sites of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, destroyed, right? But that does not necessarily mean that therefore we have to go to war with everyone in the Middle East to achieve that.
Exactly.
And that's being used on us. And so should we go back to the Carrie clip?
Yeah, we can go back to the clip.
All right, let's hear what Carrie has to say about this. Go.
Tens of thousands of Palestinians.
Israel had even entered Gaza, so it's not about them and their using Palestinian civilian death, which is horrendous and horrible. They're using it as a prop, and it doesn't matter. My religious beliefs are violated. You don't get to block me because I'm Zionist and a Jew. You want to protest Israel? Great, 100% go ahead and do it. But the university let them wear masks, even though there's a mask ban. They violated all time, place, and manner restrictions, amplified sounds. It went on for years. They kept doing this time after time again. And that's what the judge saw and said, that's not okay. They can protest, they can't block Jews, and you can't assist them in doing it.
I'm really grateful that we're having this discussion because I think this is a topic that is really affecting so many Americans. Rabbi Shapiro, he's based in New York. I invited him here today, but he's not here today. He says, and I would love your opinion on this, American Jews are increasingly treated as less fully American, our loyalty questioned, our belonging made conditional because Zionist ideology falsely claims Israel is the nation state of Jews everywhere and that every Jew is nationally tied to it. He says, this framing is anti-Semitic at its core. It strips us of our identity as Americans, recasts us as foreigners in our own country, and arms anti-Semites with accusations of divided loyalties and collective guilt for actions we neither chose nor control. No other foreign country does this. No sovereign state claims to politically represent an entire worldwide group defined by religion or heritage and bind its members to its deeds. Yet Jews alone bear this unique, unjust burden. That dangerous lie must be rejected openly and firmly. The remedy is clear: civic education that teaches unconditional American belonging through citizenship alone, not ethnicity, heritage, or any fabricated foreign tie. We are Americans, full stop, and we reject any doctrine that treats us otherwise. Would you say that statement is anti-Semitic?
What I'll say is that Natan Sharansky says there's three things that you shouldn't do with Israel. You shouldn't delegitimize it, you shouldn't demonize it, and you shouldn't apply a double standard. You can abide by those three things, you're not anti-Semitic.
So by not being a Zionist, does that make you an anti-Semite?
I don't think you need to be a Zionist to support a country that defends itself and is free and religious in a hostile neighborhood.
So is anti-Zionism
Hold on
anti-Semitism?
one second, Carrie.
Yes.
It is? It is?
Sorry. Yes.
To take that point for a second.
Let me back up. I didn't want to step over that answer. I didn't know you were still, both of you, still talking. So
Just to be clear, is anti-Zionism anti-Semitism?
Yes.
It is? Under IHRA?
Rabbi,
sure.
you're up next.
You're not
Bad
sure?
definition,
So
but
what is the
I would
definition?
love to speak to that.
Let's pause here for a second.
Undoubtedly anti-Zionist.
Michael Hichborn, is anti-Zionism anti-Semitic?
I have no idea. You know, I don't know how one defines anti-Semitism, because if you're going to talk about the question of whether you agree with or disagree with or stand in opposition to a false religion, a false ideology, does that mean that you are anti whatever that religion or ideology is?
Right.
Well, in a certain respect, yes. That makes me also anti-Muslim and anti-Hindu and anti every other religion that is not Catholic. So if you're going to define somebody by what they're against, simply because they don't affirm you in what you believe, then that pigeonholes you and makes it impossible for you to express and to live out the faith that you hold. So as a Catholic, as Catholics together, we believe that Christ is God, that Christ is King, that we have certain duties and obligations to fulfill our religious responsibilities in the practice of our faith. And it also means, as a man who marries a woman rejects all other women, a man who is a Catholic rejects all other religions. That includes modern Judaism. Now, does that make me an anti-Semite simply because I believe and profess my Catholic faith? If they say so, well, that's on them. It doesn't mean that I am going out there and campaigning against them individually and against their right to even exist. That's not the same. These people conflate everything and they try to make it out as if, well, you're not for us, so therefore you're against us, which means you are our enemy. Stop doing that.
Similar playbook to this whole alphabet soup ideology.
Absolutely.
Right? If you don't agree with me, therefore you're you're discriminating against me. Okay. If you don't want to make a birthday cake for me and my husband in my, we're two guys, therefore you don't, it's that same methodology. I mean, none of us dudes, like, come on, it's like common sense. All of us, like, obviously you're a human being. So whatever religion you are, you have a respect, you have a right to be treated as a child of God, right? Of course, right? You shouldn't be killed because of your whatever or targeted like that. That being said, we absolutely have a right to disagree with you, right? And furthermore, if this is what gets me. We made this post. Let's show this post we did yesterday on the screen, the For Perspective one. So For Perspective, we wrote this yesterday and got a ton of social media hits on this. For Perspective, if an American thinks, you may disagree with this, Michael, if America thinks it's bad to have a blind support for the country of the Vatican City State, example, like sending in billions of tax dollars over there, okay, for whatever they want, or other things, we Catholics don't consider you anti-Catholic, right?
Right.
We humbly ask you in return not to use your religion to make us blindly support a foreign nation and call us anti-Semitic if we don't. Thank you. Right?
Mhm.
So it's I think this is an intentional weaponized attack, which has worked extremely well, going back, I think, really kind of like at post World War II and heating up in 1963, right, with JFK, right?
Mhm.
So they've used this. They have used people
It's a
like that.
crybaby strategy.
It's what?
It's a crybaby strategy. In
Crybaby
other words,
strategy. Yeah.
you know, you're going to sit there and be a crybaby on a playground, and you're going to cry and whine. Teacher, they won't play with me. Teacher, they won't. They're not allowing me to get on the swing. Teacher, teacher. It's stop. Grow
Right.
up. Grow
You know,
up.
it's so crazy because we all know 1840s. What was like the biggest fear that people had about Catholics in America? That
Mhm.
somehow we were going to be like overly loyal to Rome, right? That we were going to go to like the Pope's defense of like the Pope wanted to invade America, God knows what, right? So it's like flip that around. I mean, like
Yeah.
the insanity now to put so much of our attention over to a nation state. Again, these are like a lot of the top leaders are not. They're not even God fearing people. Okay, and some of the people that suffer the most are actually those real Jews that Carrie was bringing up. So let's play the clip. Let's keep going with that.
Anti-Semitism, and undoubtedly, and one does not have to support the specific policies of the government of Israel, but to not support the right of Israel to exist, which is what anti-Zionists do, while not taking that same stand to the 28 Muslim countries and 13 Christian countries in this world, is a double standard, is hypocrisy, and is absolutely anti-Semitism.
Okay, can you stop right there?
I think it's
Okay. Here he's trying to establish a paradigm that says, notice the conflated terms. Okay. He starts by talking about there are those who say Israel does not have a right to exist. Okay. That's one term. And then he conflates that with people not supporting Israel in its fight against the Muslims who say that they should not exist. These are not conflated things. If somebody wants to say that Israel has a right to exist or doesn't have a right to exist, whatever. Okay. It's an established nation. It exists. It has its own borders. It has its own military. It has its own government. It has its own economy. Okay. It exists. There are surrounding neighbors who would like to go to war with Israel, and they probably will at some point. That is not my problem. And I am not an anti-Semite for saying that. It's not my problem. I'm not saying that Israel has a right to exist, and I'm not saying they don't have a right to exist. I'm simply saying it's not my problem. And if you and your neighbors need to go to war to figure it out, then do so. I don't care. I just don't.
Matt Walsh has a great point though on that too. Like, what defines a nation in the sense of like a nation in a certain way has to self subsist, right? And you know, it's like if we did not support Israel like we do, they would not exist, right? So I think that's why President Netanyahu has been actually very vocal about actually separating himself financially from the United States, right? To kind of show that they can be on their own, right? So it's like it's almost like they're a vassal state to us with a very strong lobby here in the United States among our politicians. That's obvious. Everyone sees that, right? Look at the polls. That's the thing. I think we're what we're seeing right now is it's an emerging battle between you have like anyone like 40 and under, basically. Look at the polls and how much has changed the last like year and a half, 2 years since the October 7th attack. And most of the younger generation has completely shifted and thinks, ironically, kind of like this Catholic viewpoint, right? That we don't have a biblical mandate to support the nation state of Israel. They're not anti-Semitic, right? They're not, right? Whatever that means. They're really not. But you have a very, typically an older boomer class, very established, a lot of power, a lot of money, a lot of resources, and they're butting heads right here. And we're kind of seeing this breakout right now on this Religious Liberty Commission, right? So can we just go to the part on Charles with Christ is King? Let's get to that, and then we'll close off there. you're going to see this here. It's the part where she literally asked the
It's
question,
also
like,
important that we not make Islamophobic remarks while we're here today. I would appreciate that. So just to be clear, are Catholics anti-Semites?
Carrie, excuse me, I'm going to interrupt the discussion. Our committee is focused on religious liberty taken from all people, whether they be Muslims, Jews, Christians, Sikhs. We've had all those witnesses here. This is not a commission on defining religions or calling out any theology, or this is not the commission for that.
Right, but we're
And so
talking
you
about a
were-
foreign nation, so I want to be clear on what the definition of anti-Semitism is. If I don't support the political state of Israel, am I an anti-Semite? Yes or no?
They already answered, asked and
Yes.
answered.
According to you on the record, yes? If I don't support the political state of Israel?
I don't personally label people. But what I'm saying is, if somebody states if somebody says they're an anti-Zionist, they are saying about themselves that they have a double standard and hypocrisy, and they're taking anti-Semitic positions.
Okay. Carrie, you feel like you have your questions in?
I don't agree with that, because as a Catholic, I don't agree that the new modern state of Israel has any biblical prophecy meaning at all. So that's my stance, and I'm Catholic.
The Catholics support the Muslims.
Yeah. Dr. Ben.
drop mic.
First of all,
Before we get,
I want to thank
before we
you all
get
for
Meg
your
Carson's response, and I
passionate.
want to hear it. Take that moment in. So she's making a point. She's making a stance. She's referring back to her Catholic faith and saying, like, look, we don't
Did you
believe
say that
Catholic.
there was a Christ is King statement in there somewhere?
I think it comes later with Seth Dillon.
Okay.
That comes later because Seth challenges her on that. But again, she's referencing Catholic faith and she's making a point. Now, what do you say to that? Because let's look at the counter arguments too, because fellow Catholics, Ryan Anderson, who's on the board of this commission, I respect Ryan. Ryan's an incredible guy. He's done so much work, especially with the transgender issues, and just a great young man, or great young man. He's my age, right? But
He's younger than I am.
he's got like a 35. I mean, he's incredible. He's one of the best minds in some of this stuff, right? So let's throw Ryan Anderson's tweet on the screen. I'm going to have you comment on it, Michael. I'll read it as you see it on the screen. After his resignation as Pope, Benedict XVI published an important academic article on the proper Catholic understanding of Judaism. His own short summary. Okay, this is from Pope Benedict Emeritus. From this overview, one can say that the new view of Judaism that developed after the council can be summarized in two statements. So this is kind of Ryan's kind of pushback against Carrie. Number one, the theory of substitution, which has hitherto determined theological reflection on this question, should be rejected. This view holds that after the rejection of Jesus Christ, Israel ceased to be the bearer of the promises of God, so that it can now be called the people, quote, who were once chosen people. That's from the prayer of the consecration of the human race of Sacred Heart. And the second point, instead, it is more correct to speak of the never revoked covenant, a theme that was developed after the council in connection with Romans chapter 9 through 11. Both of these theses, that Israel is not replaced by the church and that the covenant was never revoked, are basically correct. Again, this is Ryan Anderson from the words of Benedict, but are in many ways imprecise and need to be given further critical consideration. Then he gives the full link to Benedict's article. Comment on that, Michael. What do you think about that?
So it's interesting that around the same time that the church was reconsidering her position with regard to Jews and Judaism, that she should also change her liturgy. And if you look at what happens in the old Mass, the traditional Latin Mass, at the very beginning of the Mass, the lectionary or the book of all the readings and everything else is on the right side of the altar. Okay, the right side of the altar is considered the Jewish side of the altar. And after the reading of the epistle, an altar server who represents an angel of the Lord ascends the altar, picks up the book, descends the altar, genuflects before the tabernacle, and then places it on the left side, which is the Gentile side of the altar. And it remains there for the reading of the gospel and all of the rest of Mass. And then at the very end of Mass, after communion, the altar boy then ascends the altar, takes the book, descends the altar, genuflects before the tabernacle, goes back to the right side of the altar and sets the book there. What does this represent? This represents that after Christ came, lived, died, and was resurrected, that the Jews lost the word. The word was no longer with them, and that it was given to the Gentiles. And that what happened after that, what will happen at the end of time, is that there will be a great apostasy, a great falling away. And in that apostasy, the word will be given back to the Jews and they will be brought into the fullness of the faith. That is our Catholic faith in a nutshell. We as Catholics are fully obliged to believe this. So when you take that symbolism in the Mass and you apply it to what is now being discussed, everything makes sense. It all falls into place. But since they changed the Mass and they did away with all of those movements, what happens? You lose the symbolism and you lose perspective. And it's that perspective that is extremely important for us as Catholics to hold when having these discussions. So all of this conversation about, well, was the covenant revoked? It goes back to my fundamental question. Who are we talking about and what are we talking about? If you're talking about the land of Israel as given to the Jews, as believed by every single Jew prior to Christ's coming into the world, and then having it fulfilled in the New Testament, and that is the fullness of the faith, if those are the people to whom that covenant is given in perpetuity, yes, we agree. But if you do not make that distinction, then you don't even have a foundation for a conversation. And that's the fundamental problem with this whole thing.
How could you not, by the way, just love the old Mass? Just after what you just said, Michael, the symbolism there is incredible. It's in that liturgy. The ultimate catechesis is the liturgy. You learn your faith by watching what happens or by that participation, right? And with what's going on there with Christ on the cross on the altar, which is what the holy sacrifice in the Mass is. Just powerful. And I didn't even know that. So that's an interesting point. And that helps us put this all in place of what's going on here, and we're wrapping up the end of the show almost. Let's go and hear that Christ the King part and get to the cut to the chase there. And you're going to hear this as he pulls it up. Just Seth Dillon is going to ask the question to Carrie, is Christ the King anti-Semitic? And, as we wait for it to get pulled up, what's your take on that, Michael?
I don't know what was said, so I don't know what I'm commenting on.
Fair enough. We're right in the middle of this. Catholics in our own way. We have our Catholic Prayer for America coming up, and just play that clip whenever you find it, Charles. But Catholic Prayer for America, Washington D.C., March 19th is coming up. It's our yearly event. It's when we really just take all the issues that need our prayers here as a country, right? And we gathered together. Last year was in Mar-a-Lago. We had over 100 Catholic priests there. We knelt down in adoration and we just prayed before the Lord to ask for his help. Because at the end of the day, this is a spiritual warfare. It really is, right? So you see right there, our events coming up, and we have, some strong speakers there. Michael Flynn, Matt Wall, Sister Deidre, Father Chris, and Candace Owens, who's got a lot of heat, especially for challenging some of the stuff about Zionism. And so shaped up to be a very, very big event, right? So, okay, as he finds that, I'm just going to read to you the negative of what just happened for the break. So Carrie went on to say all this stuff. Now, what happens with Carrie, okay, as of 10 a.m. this morning? Lieutenant Dan Patrick, who's the chair of the board, released the following statement. Carrie Prejean Boller has been removed from President Trump's Religious Liberty Commission. No member of the commission has the right to hijack a hearing for their own personal political agenda on any issue. This is clearly, without question, what happened on Monday in our hearing on anti-Semitism in America. This was my decision. I mean, I disagree. I mean, he had so much pressure from him, and it just shows you the strength of that lobby inside. Like, they get what they want. They absolutely do. They run ramshot over this. You think I'm crazy? Look, let me give you a stat before, you go further in the statement. I think it's like 92, 93%. You have a 93% chance of winning every major election if you outspend the other person. Okay? Especially presidential election. Money, at the end of the day, has a very powerful effect on getting to a position of power in the White House, in the Senate, in the Congress, you name it. Okay? Whoever gives the money to that candidate has insane power. Okay? Here's a fact, everybody. It's the fact. Who gave the largest donation to President Trump in his re-election campaign? President Trump was very open about it. Miriam Adelson, she's a strong Zionist, loves Israel. She gave a $250 million donation to President Trump. When President Trump went to Israel, or was a few months ago, he said it very publicly. He said, "Look, Miriam Adelson's right there, and she's there, and he was like joking, he's like, look, sometimes you tell me like you love Israel literally more than America, right?" And it's like an open joke, but a lot of us aren't even laughing, right? Because it's at the end of the day, is this America first or what? Because it doesn't seem like it is.
Bloody and dismembered children.
Let's
Once
hear
again,
this.
the noise and hostility.
If that's Christ King, let's play it. You see Seth Dillon for the Babylon.
She often uses the word Zionist and the word Jew interchangeably. At one point, she slipped up and used the word Jew, and someone said, "Oh, you're not saying Zionist anymore?" She's like, "No, gloves are off."
So do you think saying Christ is king is anti-Semitic?
No, Christ is king.
Amen.
Christ is my king. He's the king of the universe.
So that's what started the whole thing with her, right?
But, my thing with her. Yeah, Christ, what I explained to her, and this is what she considered this deep betrayal, was simply that the phrase Christ is king has been, admittedly by many, co-opted for the purpose of identifying with a Groyper movement and putting the Jews in their proper place to show them that they are other than. And they will use the phrase in very, very nasty contexts, like I cited in my statement earlier, "Christ is king, you dirty Jew." I've had that told to me dozens of times. Do you think that that's anti-Semitic?
Of course.
Okay, so the phrase...
No, not the Christ is king part, but the "you dirty Jew."
Right. So
I say Christ is king all the time. I'm not an anti-Semite.
Right, and I don't think that makes you an anti-Semite.
Thank you.
I'm talking about how the phrase can be abused. So there's plenty of ways to use that phrase in a certain context or paired with other sentiments that make it clear that that person doesn't actually believe Christ is king. You can't say Christ is king, you dirty Jew, and call yourself a Christian. Christians worship a Jew.
Michael, what say you?
First of all, to simply look, I say that yes, Christ is king, and to claim that the phrase Christ is king is somehow anti-Semitic is, I don't even know how to put that into a category. If you want to talk about people using sentiments and saying things like "I hate the Jews" or "I hate Israel," or I think that whatever epithet you want to throw out there, those are the anti-Semitic sentiments. Say that 3 times fast. Anti-Semitic sentiments. That's the sentiment.
Right.
To say that Christ is king is the sentiment, and that it itself is somehow anti-Semitic it's a false comparison. And it's almost like saying, well, if you're going to say that you're Catholic, you are also anti-Semitic. Why? Because you believe in something that is completely antithetical to what the Jews believe. And conversely, we could say that Judaism, by its very nature, is an anti-Christ religion. If we want to play that game, we can play that game. Okay. Judaism, by its nature, is an antichrist religion. Why? Because they rejected Christ. Specifically.
They killed him.
Well, we can say they killed him, the Romans killed them, we killed them. The bottom line is Judaism, by its very nature, rejects Christ as the Messiah. By its very nature. So it is an antichrist religion. So if they want to play this game where we can say that Christ is king and that somehow is anti-Semitic, well, I will then say that Judaism, by its very nature, is an anti-Christian and anti-Christ religion. By its nature.
I will say that obviously you don't believe the phrase Christ is king is anti-Semitic or whatever that is, but I do think that we should say it with boldness, unafraid, also with a lot of humility too, because the kingship of Christ, taken from the cue of Jesus himself, he's it's a quiet strength. He was born in Bethlehem. His kingship reigns from silent tabernacles around the world. You know what I mean? Doesn't mean like you retreat, but it's like you're bold, you're strong, but you're also humble in how you use it, right? And that's and I think that has to be that coupled with fearlessness is what's gonna change the world, because it's the love of Christ. It's the love of that king. That king died on the cross for us, which is going to convert everybody. Jews, Muslims, you name it, right? And I think we have to do a much better job of just continue to show that love of Jesus for humanity, right? So, wrap up the show. Let me just finish up what,
to complete that point, let's take it one step further. The focus of our faith as Catholics is the salvation of souls.
Mm-hmm.
That's what our faith is all about, salvation. It's about the salvation of souls, not about any kind of political mechanism. It's not about any kind of political power. It's not about economics. It's not about trying to control certain regions of the world. Our faith is about the salvation of souls, period. End of story. And if you're not focused on the salvation of souls, well, then you're not following and practicing what the Catholic faith professes and believes.
Right.
And that really should be the essence of every conversation that we have with regard to other belief systems, whether it's Judaism or Hinduism or Muslim or whatever. Everything that we say and do should be predicated on the salvation of souls and the desire to see people convert. And if you are not engaged in that very specific end as you approach these other beliefs, well, then, as they say, you're not doing Christianity right.
You're not, and that's got to be our focus. And we're a Christian country in origin, and if we're a Christian country in origin, then our focus is on Christ and on saving souls, right? That's got to be the goal. That has to be the goal, right? So I think I'm disappointed with this decision. I mean, he goes on to say, the president respects all faiths, and he just, they say that the commission had some outstanding work, but they decided that she's been removed. So they booted Carrie off the commission. I think that was a complete mistake. Carrie has our support. I think you can talk about tactics, maybe how to do it, say this thing better, that way better. But at the end of the day, this has been boiling underneath the surface big time. This is not just one little blow up and it was like two people that just got on online spat. What you saw yesterday, watch that again, understand it, because that's boiling up to the surface, okay, on a major political issue for the next election too. Take it back. It's political, but it's theological in origin and solution, which has severe political implications on where you stand and how you view the different religions around you, right? So we're seeing that kind of played out. I think it's important. That's why we do what we do, people. Catholics for Catholics. We've got to be in the public square. We're going to be talking about these issues. And if our people need backing, like Carrie, doggone it, they have our support, because they need this. We're going to embolden these people, right? Because it's so easy. That we've seen it before in the past in different countries, different cultures around the world. We know this. They always go for people at the top, the one at the top. Who is at the top? It's the Catholic Church, the one true church, founded by Christ. The enemies know that, okay? The devil knows that. He goes for them because they will try whatever they can to create a society, whether it's communism, CCP, whether it's Mexico, Cristero War, to flip the tables and end up killing Catholics, martyrs. They want that. Whether it's the Muslim, you name it. Okay. So we got to be very, very on our game. Watch out for this. Nip it in the bud and push back while we can. Last comment, Michael. You never.
Well, so my last comment, I was pretty harsh in what I've been saying, and I want to turn what I said kind of on its head just a little bit. So what I've been saying is that when you have the Zionists talking about the right of Israel to exist and the Jews controlling, having a right to Israel and et cetera, et cetera. And my fundamental question is, who are the Jews? The same goes for those who want to spread specific conspiracy theories saying the Jews control Hollywood, the Jews control the banking system, the Jews control international politics. The same question holds. Who are we talking about?
Mm-hmm.
If you're talking about individuals who happen to profess a certain belief or happen to have a certain ethnic background, that's one thing. But if you're going to talk about a conspiracy that involves a certain group of people, you're going to have to name names and show that there is an overarching ideology associated with their beliefs that establishes what it is that's being controlled and how it's being controlled and the network that's involved. But to simply say the Jews, it drives me crazy because there's no defined term being established in this particular set of discussions. And so it goes both ways. And that's really all I'm saying here.
Well said. Well explained. It's you gotta be specific, define your terms, because it can get very nuanced pretty quick, and the ultimate definition of where you stand is, are you following truth or are you following evil, right? It's like God versus the devil, right? Christ versus the Antichrist. Okay. So that's what we're about. And that's where we gather in DC to worship the Christ, our Lord, right? And from March 19th, Catholic Carrie of America, special announcement in that regard. We are going to, this is such a big gathering, a lot of people are coming from all over the country to be part of that. We want our Catholic priests to be there, okay? It's important to have those priests in the room. Last year, we were able to bring almost 100 Catholic priests there to Mar-a-Lago. You can see them all there. They're just, some of those guys are just, they're real warriors in their own respective quiet. Some of them are a little bit more vocal ways, and they stand up for us, and we need our priests with us because they bring us the sacraments. So a lot of priests have been asked us, do you got any, is C4C going to cover them this year like last year? So we made the decision. We're going to be announcing today that we are going to be covering up to 50 priests to come and they can apply. We'll have a form there where they can apply it like last year if they want to attend, comp tickets. Okay. We're obviously inviting you to support this because we're going on a limb to make this happen for these priests, right? These are costs we have to kind of consume as the nonprofit, and anything that you can give, we will match whatever you give dollar for dollar to make help these priests get there and be part of this day. Okay. So this is the 250th anniversary of the country, right? And it's an important moment as Catholic patriots to gather there, be there in DC. Michael's going to be there, right, Michael? I believe you are. Yes, you are. Good. Okay, good. Yes, awesome. And it'll be a special day. So thanks. It's been a special edition of Catholic Champion. I will have another pretty crazy announcement next week. For those of us on the show, maybe we'll give a free ticket away on the show. So same place, same time, next Wednesday. This has been an edition of Catholic Champion. God bless and fight on.